Hi everyone, in this video we're going to talk about what the chess pieces are worth. So we'll dive straight in and start with the pawns. A pawn is worth 1 point, and as you can see each side starts with 8 pawns, so it helps give an understanding of why a pawn is the least valuable piece on the board. You have 8 of them, so it's your most disposable piece during a game of chess. These are kind of like your foot soldiers, if you will, and a pawn also has the least flexibility when it moves. So pawns can only move in straight lines, either 1 or 2 squares. I've covered the movement of the pieces in another video, so we'll make an assumption here that you understand how the pieces move. And once you've moved the pawn, you can't then move it backwards. It can only continue moving forwards. So because of this lack of flexibility, plus the number of them that you have, it means that they're a more disposable piece and they're only worth 1 point. We'll then move on to what's known as the minor pieces, which is the knights and the bishops. Knights and bishops are worth 3 points each, and so when you're starting out in chess, you can always think of trading these two pieces off for one another as an equal trade. So if you were to trade your knight for an opponent's knight, that would be an equal trade, and if you were to trade your knight for your opponent's bishop, that would also be an equal trade. As you get more advanced in your chess understanding, there can be positions where you wouldn't be well advised to trade your bishops for knights, depending on what's going on in the position, but that's something that should be considered further down the line. If we move on to the rooks now, the rooks are worth 5 points, and the reason that they're worth more than knights and bishops is because they have a greater scope of attacking capability. So again, I've covered this in my beginner series on how to move the pieces, check that out if you need to. Rooks can move down files and along ranks, so they have a very long scope of attack as a chess piece. Bishops also have long scopes of attack. They move down the diagonals, but the difference between the bishop and the rook is the bishop is always going to be confined to the colour diagonal that it starts on. So if I highlight white's queen's bishop here, which is starting on a dark squared diagonal, that bishop will never be able to make its way onto a light squared diagonal. So you only have one dark squared bishop in a game and one light squared bishop in a game. Whereas with your rooks, because of the way they can move onto different files, along different ranks, and they're therefore much more flexible as a piece. So that's why rooks are worth 5 points. If we move on to the queen now, the queen is worth 9 points. And the queen is in effect a combination of a bishop and a rook, because it can move down files, along ranks, and also down diagonals. But unlike the bishops, it isn't confined to just the colour of diagonal that it starts on. Because of the way it moves, it could hop onto a dark squared diagonal and then a light squared diagonal, and so on and so forth. And so that's why if you were to add a rook and a bishop together, 5 plus 3 and get 8, it doesn't actually equal what the queen's worth. The queen equals 9. It's got that extra point of value, basically because it has that extra flexibility around the diagonals it can move to. So your queen is the most powerful piece on the board and something you need to protect and be careful of throughout the game. And finally we come to the king. The king doesn't actually have a points value in chess, and the reason being the king is the most valuable piece on the board because of the fact that you can't afford to lose it. If your king is ever caught in checkmate, then you lose the game on the spot, regardless of if you have more valuable pieces on the board than your opponent. So that's the reason why protecting the king is one of the most important concepts in the whole game of chess. So that covers off the basics of the piece values. It's important to remember that these work as a rule of thumb, so you can roughly use these points values as a guide to understand when it's good to trade a piece and when it's bad to trade a piece. It is important to note though that it won't always be the case that trading a lesser value piece for a higher value piece is a bad move, because if, for example, by making a piece sacrifice you were then able to checkmate the opponent's king, then making that sacrifice would actually be a good move. But certainly when you're starting out at chess, understanding these values and when to trade and when not to trade is a very good foundation for winning more games. Guys, I hope you found that video really helpful. Don't forget to comment down below if you do have any questions. Please like, share, subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I hope to see you again on a future video.